The fork slips. You have just finished eating and you're carrying the plate away. The knife is resting against the fork, the plate tilts slightly, and then the metal slides off. It hits the floor with a sharp sound. A bit of food falls with it, the plate bumps the counter. Nothing serious has happened, but there is suddenly a small mess where there was not supposed to be one. A few seconds earlier, your mind had been running an argument no one else could hear. You were turning something over, sharpening the point, answering an imagined objection, maybe saying things internally with more force than you would use in a real conversation. The thought had heat in it. Then the metal hits the floor, and for a brief moment, the timing seems to matter. It can feel like the accident arrived as kind of a response, not in a fully formed way, not necessarily as a belief you would defend out loud, more like a small reflex inside the mind. Maybe this happened because I was being negative. That is a strange sentence when it is stated plainly. A negative thought did not move the fork. The blade had an angle, the metal had weight, your hand moved in a certain way. There is no need for a larger story, but in the moment, the mind begins with the felt shape of the event. Something unpleasant happened. It happened right after an unpleasant thought. The body reacts before the explanation is ready. There is surprise, annoyance, maybe a small flash of guilt. Then the mind looks backwards and searches for what the moment belongs to. This is where a small accident can become more than an accident. The event gives the mind a cue, the feeling gives it urgency, the timing gives it a pattern. And if a person already carries a belief that thoughts attract life, then the mind has somewhere to place the pattern. That belief may not have arrived as a formal teaching. It may have come through a parent's way of speaking, spiritual language, or positive thinking culture. Your thoughts shape what comes towards you. The rule might settle roughly like this: your inner state is not only private, what you put out comes back, what you focus on expands. Negativity pulls more negativity toward it. So when something goes wrong, one question can appear before analysis starts: what was I putting out into the universe before this happened? That question can become a quiet form of self monitoring. It does not only ask a person to act well, it asks them to think correctly. Anger is no longer just anger. Resentment is no longer only resentment. Doubt is no longer a passing state. Each one starts to feel like a possible cause for something more. Then, everyday life begins providing material. You're angry in the morning and later the day goes badly. You resent someone and then stub your toe. You criticize something in your head and the fork falls. Each example is small by itself, but the mind starts seeing a rhythm: negative state, unpleasant event, confirmation. The belief feels as if it is discovering reality, but often it is organizing attention. Inner states do not affect life, they affect what we notice, how carefully we move, how we speak, how we interpret other people, and what we remember. Someone who is angry may move with more force than care. Someone who is anxious may miss what is in front of them because attention is already occupied. Someone who expects the day to go badly may notice every small failure and pass over the parts that went well. So there is a real mechanism here. The mistake is not noticing a connection between mind and life. The mistake is placing the connection in the wrong location. Thoughts can shape the way a person moves through the world. That does not mean thoughts directly bring events into being. A thought can change attention. Attention can change how carefully someone moves, what they expect, and what they notice. Sometimes that changes behavior. Sometimes it only changes interpretation or memory. Either way, the real connection stays inside ordinary pathways. The old belief often compresses all of that into one sentence: thoughts attract reality. The sentence works because it is simple. Randomness becomes feedback. Accident becomes message. Misfortune becomes instruction. It can give a person a sense of control, but it can also create pressure. Now, the person is monitoring the mental conditions that might be blamed for life. A bad mood becomes morally loaded. Instead of anger being information about a boundary or something that may need recalibration, anger becomes contamination. This can happen even when the person no longer consciously believes the old model. A person may say, I do not really believe thoughts attract events, and still, when the timing lines up, the body reacts. The old association fires before the adult explanation catches up. The person does not choose the association, it happens. The first association is not usually a deliberate conclusion, it is a fast pattern. The mind binds what happened with what was felt. It sees proximity and tries to turn it into meaning. The reflective work begins after that. A person can notice and say to themselves, something in me just linked these two events. That sentence changes the whole structure. Instead of this happened because I was negative, the sentence becomes my mind is trying to connect this accident to the mood I was in. This is where the mechanism becomes visible. First, there is a charged inner state. Then, something unpleasant happens nearby. The body reacts, the mind searches backward. If an inherited belief is available, it supplies a bridge. The thought and the event belong together. But confirmation is not the same as causation. A bad event following a negative thought does not show that the thought caused the event. It only shows that the mind found a meaningful sequence. To establish cause, we would need a mechanism, repeatable conditions, and the missing cases. This is how a belief can feel tested when it has mostly been selected. The same pattern can appear in larger situations. Sometimes the inner state shaped performance, tone, attention, or memory. Sometimes it did not. The difficult part is refusing to let the old belief answer before the evidence does. A more careful question is not, did my thoughts attract this? It is, what real pathway could connect my state to what happened? If there is a pathway, it can be examined. Was I distracted? Did I speak differently? Did I move too quickly? Did my mood change what I noticed? Did I change what I remembered? And if no pathway appears, the event may simply be an event. The fork slipped. The message was delayed. The opportunity closed. The person's mood was nearby, but the nearness is not proof. That is the distinction the old belief often erases. It takes a useful reminder. Your state affects how you move through the world and turns it into a claim that your state attracts what the world sends back. There is nothing wrong with caring about one's inner state. The problem begins when inner life becomes a place of constant causal suspicion. Then every bad event asks the person to inspect themselves. What did I think? Was I negative? Did I attract this? A calmer model leaves more room. It says, my thoughts matter, but not because they directly control reality. They matter because they shape attention, emotion, interpretation, and memory. They can influence outcomes through real pathways. They can also sit beside events they did not cause. This allows a person to take responsibility for real pathways without taking responsibility for events they did not cause. If anxiety narrowed my attention, I can work with that. But if the fork slipped because the plate tilted and the metal moved, I do not need to turn that into a message about my moral or emotional state. The event can be ordinary again. Not every coincidence has to become a sign. Not every bad moment has to become feedback. Not every negative thought has to be treated as a force moving through reality. Sometimes the mind finds a pattern because it is built to find patterns. Sometimes the old belief gives that pattern a meaning before the evidence has done anything. And sometimes the most important act is not forcing the mind to stop doing that, but noticing when it has started. This is my mind making a link. Now, the link can be examined. The person does not have to obey the first meaning that arrives. The open question is not whether thoughts matter, they do. The more precise question is what kind of mattering they have. Do they shape how we move, notice, speak, remember, and respond? Often, yes. Do they cause external events to respond through hidden alignment? That is a much larger claim. And when a bad moment happens, besides a bad thought, the task is to keep those two levels separate long enough for reality to show which one we're actually dealing with.